Pam Bondi stood motionless at the edge of the CNN studio set, her trademark blonde hair framing a face that betrayed no emotion as she watched Karoline Leavitt's attack play out on the monitor. The 29-year-old former Trump spokesperson had just spent 3 minutes calling Bondi a washed-up politician desperate for relevance and a lawyer who failed her own state. The producers hadn't told Bondi that Leavitt would go this personal. They hadn't warned her that this debate about border policy would turn into character assassination. The studio lights seemed to grow hotter as the host announced, and now joining us live to respond, former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi. Cameras swiveled. The audience held its breath. Leavitt, fresh off her verbal assault, sat with a satisfied smirk, clearly expecting Bondi to fumble or lash out emotionally. But what happened in the next 90 seconds would not only silence Leavitt, but leave the entire studio speechless and potentially change both women's political futures forever. Before we dive deeper into this incredible confrontation, please hit that like button and subscribe so you won't miss our breaking political analysis every week. The CNN studio that evening had been electric with tension from the moment Karoline Leavitt had taken her seat. At just 29, Leavitt had built a reputation as one of the most aggressive defenders of the MAGA movement. A former assistant press secretary under Trump, and later a New Hampshire congressional candidate, she had perfected the art of the televised political attack, quick, merciless, and designed to leave opponents reeling. Tonight's topic was supposed to be the new border legislation, but Leavitt had other plans. When the host asked for her opening statement, she immediately pivoted. "I'm happy to discuss border policy," Leavitt began, her voice carrying the practiced confidence of someone who had spent years in front of cameras. "But first, I think viewers should know exactly who they're hearing from tonight." She turned slightly toward the empty chair where Bondi would soon sit. "Pam Bondi talks about protecting Americans. But where was that protection when she was Florida's Attorney General? Crime rates up, opioid deaths skyrocketing, and what was her biggest achievement? Appearing on Fox News." The host tried to interject, but Leavitt pressed on, her voice rising. "She's not here to offer solutions. She's here because, at 58, she's desperate to stay relevant in a Republican Party that's moved on without her. She's a lawyer who failed her own state and now wants to lecture us about national security." In the green room, Pam Bondi watched this attack unfold on the monitor, her expression unreadable. As Florida's first female attorney general who had served 2 terms, Bondi had weathered political storms before. She had prosecuted major consumer fraud cases, fought human trafficking, and battled the opioid industry when many politicians were still ignoring the crisis. A producer approached nervously. "Miss Bondi, I'm sorry about this. We didn't know she would go personal. Do you want a minute before going on?" Bondi shook her head, eyes still fixed on the screen. "No, I'm ready." She straightened her blue blazer and checked her notes one last time. What the producer didn't see was Bondi slipping a folded newspaper clipping into her pocket, something she had kept from her research team, something about Leavitt that nobody in the studio knew yet. As Bondi walked onto the set, the stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about defending her record anymore. This was about showing what happened when political attacks crossed the line from policy into personal destruction. The audience, both in the studio and at home, was watching 2 different generations of Republican women face off, one representing the establishment legal mind, the other embodying the confrontational new guard. The host, visibly uncomfortable with how personal the segment had already become, turned to Bondi. "Miss Bondi, you've heard some strong criticism from Ms. Leavitt. Your response?" Pam Bondi settled into her chair, positioned her microphone, and smiled, not the defensive smile of someone preparing to counterattack, but the confident smile of a prosecutor who had just caught a witness in a contradiction. "Thank you for having me," Bondi began, her voice calm and measured, a stark contrast to Leavitt's aggressive delivery. "I came here tonight to discuss solutions for our border crisis, but Miss Leavitt seems more interested in attacking my career. That's fine. I've been in public service long enough to expect that." Leavitt shifted in her seat, the smirk still playing on her lips, clearly satisfied that she had thrown Bondi off balance. "But since Ms. Leavitt brought up my record," Bondi continued, "let me share what actually happened during my time as Florida's Attorney General. We shut down pill mills when other states weren't even acknowledging the problem. We sued major pharmaceutical companies years before it became politically advantageous. We recovered over $1 billion for Florida consumers who had been defrauded. The host nodded, seemingly relieved that Bondi was keeping things professional. And regarding the border policy that we were supposed to be discussing tonight. Actually, Bondi interrupted gently. Since Ms. Leavitt opened this door about credentials and experience, I think it's important the viewers understand the full picture. She turned directly to Leavitt. You mentioned my age, 58, as if experience is somehow a liability, but experience is exactly what helps us avoid mistakes. Leavitt's expression hardened. The mistakes were yours, Miss Bondi. Florida's crime rate fell 26% during my tenure, Bondi countered, still maintaining her composure. That's public record, not personal opinion. But I'm more interested in why you feel the need to make this personal rather than discuss actual policy solutions. The tension in the studio was thickening. The producer in the control room signaled the host to regain control of the segment. Let's redirect to the border legislation, the host attempted, but Leavitt was already firing back. This isn't personal, it's factual, Leavitt insisted, her voice rising slightly. The American people deserve to know who's advising their politicians. Someone who cozied up to Big Pharma while Floridians were dying. That's absolutely false, Bondi interjected, her calm facade cracking slightly. In fact, I led the fight against pharmaceutical companies when it wasn't politically popular. But since you want to discuss integrity and transparency, she paused, reaching into her pocket. The host sensed something unexpected was about to happen. Before we continue, I want to remind both our guests that we'd like to focus on policy, not... I agree completely, Bondi said, cutting him off with a smile. But Miss Leavitt has made serious accusations about my character and record. I think it's only fair that we examine her own history of public statements with the same scrutiny. Bondi unfolded the newspaper clipping she had kept in her pocket. Miss Leavitt, in 2019, you gave an interview to your college newspaper, where you stated, and I quote, "Political discourse has become too personal. We need to focus on ideas, not attacks." You also said that you admired prosecutors who put politics aside to uphold the law. That prosecutor you were referring to was me, after my office's handling of the consumer fraud cases. The studio fell silent. Leavitt's face froze in momentary confusion, clearly trying to recall the interview. I have the full article. Here, Bondi continued, holding up the clipping. Your words, Miss Leavitt, before you became what you once criticized. The cameras caught Leavitt's expression shifting from confidence to something closer to alarm. The host, sensing the dramatic turn, leaned forward. Miss Leavitt, would you like to respond to this apparent contradiction? Leavitt quickly recovered. That was years ago, before I saw how the establishment Republicans like Ms. Bondi failed to support President Trump's agenda. People evolve. My views changed when I saw how ineffective the old approach was. People do evolve, Bondi acknowledged, nodding. But principles shouldn't, and attacking someone's character rather than their ideas isn't evolution, it's degradation. The producer in the control room signaled for a commercial break, giving both women a chance to collect themselves. As the cameras temporarily stopped rolling, Leavitt leaned over to her aide, whispering intensely. Bondi remained seated, reviewing her notes, seemingly unfazed by the brewing storm. The host approached Bondi during the break. This is getting intense. Are you okay to continue? Bondi nodded. Of course, we haven't even gotten to the substance yet. When the cameras started rolling again, the host tried once more to steer the conversation. Let's turn to the border legislation that Congress is debating. Miss Leavitt, your thoughts on the specifics of the bill. Leavitt, composure regained, launched into a critique of the bill's enforcement provisions, calling them weak and ineffective. She highlighted several loopholes and argued that the legislation would actually worsen the border crisis. When it was Bondi's turn, she first addressed the policy points, methodically countering Leavitt's claims with specific sections of the legislation. Then she skillfully tied it back to their earlier exchange. This is exactly why personal attacks are so damaging to our political discourse, Bondi explained. While Ms. Leavitt was busy researching my career for attack lines, she missed several key provisions in this bill that actually strengthen enforcement. Policy details matter more than personal destruction. Leavitt's eyes narrowed. The studio audience could feel the tension building toward something unprecedented. The control room producer's voice came through the host's earpiece. "This is explosive. Let them go." "Miss Leavitt," the host said, "you've heard Miss Bondi's defense of her record and her critique of your approach. Your response?" Leavitt leaned forward, abandoning all pretense of policy discussion. "What's interesting is how Miss Bondi dodges responsibility by changing the subject. She talks about my college interview from years ago but won't address why she disappeared from Florida's fight against the opioid crisis when the cameras weren't rolling. The people in this country are tired of politicians who only show up when there's press coverage." Several audience members nodded. Leavitt, sensing momentum, pressed harder. "And let's talk about consistency since Miss Bondi brought it up. Where was her consistency when she switched positions on healthcare 3 times in 4 years? Where was the principled prosecutor when her office declined to join lawsuits that didn't generate headlines?" The host turned to Bondi. "Some serious allegations there. Your response?" What happened next left the entire studio in stunned silence. Pam Bondi didn't immediately speak. Instead, she reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick blue folder. She placed it deliberately on the table between them. "Miss Leavitt," Bondi began, her voice now carrying the unmistakable precision of a prosecutor addressing a jury. "I came prepared tonight, not for personal attacks. I came prepared to discuss border policy, but I also came prepared for the possibility that you would continue the approach you've become known for." Bondi opened the folder. "You mentioned the opioid crisis. Here's the timeline of every action my office took, including the meetings without press, the depositions that never made headlines, and the settlements that helped fund treatment centers across Florida." She slid several papers toward Leavitt. "Facts, not accusations." Leavitt glanced at the documents but didn't touch them. "You mentioned healthcare positions," Bondi continued, pulling out another set of papers. "Here are my consistent statements over 6 years, with full context, not the selective quotes your research team pulled together." She placed these documents next to the others. The studio was completely silent now, every eye fixed on the growing pile of evidence. "But most importantly," Bondi said, her voice dropping slightly as she removed a final document from the folder, "I have here the internal memo from your current employer, dated just 2 weeks ago, instructing staff to, and I quote, prioritize personal attacks on Bondi's character over policy discussions because her policy knowledge exceeds our briefing materials." Gasps erupted from the audience. The host's eyes widened. "Miss Bondi, are you saying—" "I'm saying," Bondi continued, holding up the memo for the cameras to see, "that Ms. Leavitt's attacks tonight weren't spontaneous passion. They weren't righteous indignation. They were a calculated strategy because someone decided winning the argument was more important than having an honest discussion about issues affecting real Americans." The camera cut to Leavitt, whose face had drained of color. That's not," she stammered. "Where did you get that?" "The source isn't important," Bondi replied calmly. "The content is, and what it reveals about the state of our political discourse." Bondi turned directly to the camera. "To everyone watching at home, this is why nothing gets done in Washington. This is why we can't solve the border crisis, or healthcare, or any other major issue. Because too many people come to the table planning to destroy their opponents rather than develop solutions." She turned back to Leavitt. "I don't blame you personally, Miss Leavitt. You're following the playbook you've been given. But I do hold you accountable for choosing to use it." The host, finally finding his voice, turned to Leavitt. "That's a serious document she's presented. Would you like to respond?" Leavitt was visibly shaken, but attempted recovery. "That memo is taken out of context. Every communication team develops strategy. The fact that Miss Bondi somehow obtained an internal document raises more questions about her methods than about our preparation." "The methods?" Bondi raised an eyebrow. "The memo was sent to 17 people, including 3 who don't even work for your organization anymore. It wasn't exactly Fort Knox." The audience erupted in unexpected laughter. Even the host couldn't suppress a smile. But Ms. Leavitt misses the point, Bondi continued. I don't care about the political strategies. I care about solutions. So let me offer this. For the remainder of our time, let's agree to discuss only the border legislation, its actual provisions, its likely effects, and potential improvements. No personal attacks, no character assassination, just substance. Can we do that? The camera focused on Leavitt, who found herself in an impossible position. Refuse and confirm everything Bondi had just exposed. Agree and abandon the strategy her team had planned. After a moment's hesitation that felt like an eternity on live television, Leavitt nodded. Fine, let's discuss the legislation. Excellent, Bondi smiled, gathering up her documents and returning them to the folder. Now, regarding Section 4.3 on asylum processing reforms. What followed was 15 minutes of the most substantive policy discussion the program had aired in months. Bondi demonstrated encyclopedic knowledge of the legislation, while Leavitt struggled to match her command of the details. When the host finally ended the segment, he turned to the camera. I think we've all witnessed something extraordinary tonight. Thank you to both our guests. As the cameras stopped rolling, the studio audience erupted in applause, much of it directed at Bondi, who had just delivered a masterclass in political counterpunching without ever abandoning substance. The impact of the Bondi-Leavitt confrontation was immediate and seismic. As the production team began dismantling the set, stagehands whispered among themselves and audience members lingered, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Behind the scenes, Leavitt disappeared quickly into a back room with her team, while Bondi calmly gathered her materials, thanked the production staff, and even took a moment to speak with audience members who approached her. One producer turned to another. Did you know she had that memo? No one knew, came the reply. Not even her own team looked surprised. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, clips began circulating online. The first to go viral was the moment Bondi revealed the memo, titled simply, Bondi Exposes. Political hit job live on CNN. Within an hour, it had been viewed over 2 million times. Social media exploded with reactions across the political spectrum. Just witnessed Pam Bondi give a masterclass in how to handle personal attacks. Wow. Bondi vs. Leavitt. Leavitt came with accusations. Bondi came with receipts. Game over. Memogate. This is what happens when you attack a prosecutor who actually knows how to build a case. Bondi wins. Even those who disagreed with Bondi's politics found themselves reluctantly impressed. Not a fan of Bondi's policies, but that takedown was surgical precision. Leavitt never knew what hit her. Fascinating to watch someone win a political argument without ever raising their voice. Old school beats new school tonight. By midnight, the major news sites had headlines. CNN Bondi-Leavitt exchange becomes most watched cable news clip of 2025. Fox News. Bondi exposes political hit strategy in stunning confrontation. MSNBC. An era of personal attacks. Bondi redirects to policy substance. New York Times. The political implications began to crystallize by the following morning. Pundits across networks were analyzing what the confrontation meant for the broader political landscape. On Morning Joe, the discussion centered on generational approaches to politics. What we saw last night, explained a veteran political analyst, was the collision of two political eras. Leavitt represents the social media age, where the quick attack generates clicks and attention. Bondi represents an earlier approach, methodical, evidence-based, and focused on substance. Last night, the latter won decisively. Does this signal a shift back toward more substantive political discourse? The host asked. Too early to tell, the analyst replied, but it certainly provides a blueprint for how experienced politicians can counter the personal attack strategy that's become so prevalent. By mid-morning, the fallout reached Leavitt's organization. 3 senior communication staff were reportedly asked to resign over the leaked memo. Leavitt herself released a brief statement. Last night's discussion became more heated than intended. My goal remains to advocate strongly for policies I believe will strengthen America. I look forward to future opportunities to engage on the issues. The statement's conspicuous lack of apology or direct reference to Bondi did not go unnoticed by commentators. Bondi's response came through a brief morning interview on Fox and Friends. "Last night wasn't about embarrassing Ms. Leavitt. It was about demonstrating that we can disagree on policy without destroying each other personally. The American people deserve debates on substance, not character assassination. I hope this can be a turning point." When asked if she had planned the confrontation, Bondi smiled. "I prepare for every possibility. That's what 2 terms as Attorney General teaches you." Political strategists began calling campaigns and political figures, offering variations of the same advice. If you're going up against Bondi, stick to policy. By afternoon, analysis had shifted to the broader implications for political communication. The Bondi method, as one political science professor dubbed it on Twitter, provides a template for handling personal attacks. 1. Stay calm. 2. Come with evidence. 3. Expose the strategy. 4. Redirect to substance. The hashtag #Bondi method was trending by 3 RPM. Perhaps the most telling reaction came from political candidates preparing for upcoming debates. 2 congressional campaigns reportedly scrapped planned personal attack lines and refocused on policy distinctions. A gubernatorial candidate was overheard telling staff, "I don't want to be Leavitt on stage." Beyond the immediate political fallout, cultural commentators noted the significance of the confrontation being between 2 women. For decades, female politicians have been told they must either be liked or respected, but rarely both, wrote he, a prominent columnist. Last night, Bondi demonstrated you can command respect without ever sacrificing dignity or descending into the personal. It's a watershed moment for political communication. 3 days after the confrontation, polling showed something remarkable. Bondi's favorability had increased across partisan lines. Even among those who disagreed with her policies, her handling of the situation earned grudging respect. Leavitt, meanwhile, found her invitations to primetime shows temporarily drying up. Network producers, fearing a similar on-air exposure, became hesitant to book her against experienced opponents. The most lasting impact, however, was on public discourse itself. The confrontation became a case study in political communication courses. Media training firms began offering seminars on evidence-based responses to personal attacks, the Bondi approach. 1 month later, during a contentious Senate hearing, a senator under personal attack calmly produced documentation refuting the accusations, then asked, "Can we return to policy now?" The move was instantly dubbed pulling a Bondi on social media. For Pam Bondi personally, the aftermath brought unexpected opportunities. Previously considered part of the old guard, she suddenly found herself in demand as both a policy expert and media strategist. 3 major political campaigns reached out about senior advisory roles. Karoline Leavitt eventually rebounded, but with a noticeably different approach. In her next television appearance, she focused exclusively on policy critiques, avoiding any personal characterizations of her opponents. Perhaps the most telling measure of the confrontation's impact came 6 months later, when a major polling firm asked voters what they wanted to see more of in political discussions. Facts over personal attacks topped the list at 78%, a data point cited as the Bondi effect. The night that began with a planned character assassination had instead become a turning point in political communication, proof that in an age of personal destruction, substance could still prevail over smears. As Bondi had told a reporter weeks after the confrontation, "In the end, the American people are smarter than political strategists give them credit for. They can tell the difference between someone attacking a person and someone addressing a problem." The confrontation that left a studio speechless had found its voice in a changed political conversation. If you enjoyed this analysis of the Bondi-Leavitt confrontation, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We bring you the deepest insights into political showdowns every week. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when political history is being made.